It's been 10 days since the Titan sub, made right here in Everett, lost contact with its mothership.
500 meters, 30. What's that thing?
He wanted to do something different, and he wanted to make a name for himself. Sometimes I often wondered, just in his actions, if he was borderline a psychopath.
Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn, and I am so glad you found me. Do not even make a comment about the hair, okay, you guys? We are just going to breeze past it in life right now. I'm in my midlife crisis era. Everything's fine. It's gonna be okay. Quick recap. I woke up wanting to strip out all the black in my hair. Initially, I was like, maybe we're just gonna go, dark brown. The black just seems like a little bit too harsh. And I was not expecting how much was actually gonna get lifted just from like a color remover. So then I was like, well, what are we gonna do now? Like, this was actually like quite a success. I know it's splotchy and stuff, but like in the grand scheme of things, this is quite a success. So now I'm just I'm feeling like, like when people have a baby and like after like 5 days it's not named because they're just like, I'm getting too overwhelmed by this life decision. That's how I'm feeling right now. So we're just going to stick with that, okay? And that's all that will be said about the hair situation. I don't know what I'll look like next time you see me. So this is going to be a fun little game for all of us. Today we are talking about the Titan Ocean Gate tragedy because I have thoughts. I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time, and today's the day. Before we get into all of those thoughts, though, I have a quick riddle for you. Today's riddle is, I wander without settling, map in my hand, through jungle or desert, across sea and sand. I seek what's unknown, I knock every door, history's made by the steps I implore. What am I? And while you think about that, I have one quick message for you. Thank you to our sponsor today, Fume. You already know how much I love Fume. I'm such a fan, huge fan of them, huge fan of their mission. If you've never heard of them before, though, let me fill you in. Fume is a award-winning flavored air device. This is not a vape. This is not an e-cigarette. There is no vapor, no nicotine, no batteries, no charging. It is literally just natural flavor that goes into your mouth, not your lungs. It also moonlights as the best emotional support clicky fidget friend. I feel like I'm giving like one of the air traffic control. No, flight attendant. Speeches. So everybody, let's all have the attention like you would. Are you guys one of those ones that like gives the attention and like you're looking around offended when no one else is, even if you've heard it 9,000 times? So if that's you, because Fume has been a long-time sponsor, please give the same attention. You can twist it. You can snap it, it clicks. It also satisfies that hand-to-mouth sensation without the chemicals, without the mess, and honestly, without the guilt. I'm sure if you've ever tried stopping something cold turkey, you know it is very hard, not like just like mentally and emotionally. There is like that physical aspect of it too. Like you just kind of look like you're lost in the world. And Fume helps to like replace your hand-to-mouth fixation, calming your nervous tension through fidgeting and distracting you from bad habits and giving you delicious flavor. Again, when it comes to something like, we're going to go back to the airport spiel. I love traveling with my Fume on the plane. Not only if I feel like I'm like, ooh, there's no air, there's no vapor, you're allowed to have some delicious flavor, but I love it for the fidget aspect. Fume also continuously invests in third-party studies, making sure that their products are not only satisfying, but they are also safe. And they are backed by doctors in the US, so it's not only trendy, but trusted. If you or someone you know is trying to let go of certain habits, or if you just like having something to do with your hands that doesn't involve like impulsive buying anything online, Fume is kind of perfect. Right now, you can try it out by going to www.tryfume.com/SherrilynDale or scan the QR code and use my code SherrilynDale to get a free Fume topper when you order your journey pack today. Once again, that's tryfume.com/SherrilynDale, or scan the QR code on the screen and use my code SherrilynDale to get a free Fume topper when you purchase your journey pack today. Thank you so much again to Fume for sponsoring today's video. And that concludes our safety briefing. Okay, so for anybody that's needing like a little bit of a refresher, on June 16th, 2023, Ocean Gate Expedition CEO Stockton Rush and 4 other passengers, Stockton, Hamish Harding, Shahzada Dawood, Suleiman Dawood, and Paul-Henri Nargeolet, they embarked on the thrill of a lifetime. It was a dive to see the Titanic. Tragically, none of them returned to shore, and through the weeks, months, and now even years, the public has come to know that this was 1000% avoidable. This shouldn't have happened, plain and simple, but because of ego, pride, ambition even, I guess, 5 lives were lost, one of them only 19 years old. Now, I feel like if we go back to 2023, June 16th, 2023, this story was absolutely inescapable for weeks, right down to like those moments, right, of like this critical, hopefully like rescue mission at that point when there was communication that was lost between the crew like at shore and the submersible. Initially, it was like the best case scenario was that this was a mechanical failure, deep into the North Atlantic Ocean, and there was 96 hours of oxygen for the 5 passengers. So that was kind of like a countdown everywhere you were looking. And then once that, had expired, it became like a recovery operation. I was one of the people that was absolutely glued to my feeds during this time. I don't like to say like Titanic fanatic, but I guess that's how you would describe it. I've been captivated by the story since my mom showed me this like antique book that was passed on to our family of the Titanic. And this was like made like a few years after the sinking. It's incredible. And then when the movie came out, I had already been like this little expert. So I went to the theater and watched it like 12 or 14 times, somewhere around there. And I don't know who remembers this, but Pepsi did a contest where they were like saying you could go down to like see the Titanic. I believe this was in like not even 2000, it was like 1998. I think I was in like 5th or 6th grade. And I remember my girlfriend and I going to the convenience store for like 2 months straight to try and spell Titanic with the caps, like saying like we're going to go down. And I do remember seeing an advertisement for Ocean Gate in like 2019-ish, I think. And I shared something, I think it was probably on Facebook, asking if anyone had like $250,000 laying around to go visit. At the end of the day, though, like I know myself, I know I wouldn't have gone. I don't know, the past like 10 years, I've just like developed this deep fear of darkness in water. I used to be able to look at underwater photos of the Titanic, and now it's like actually really hard for me to do that. I get like the chills and freaked out. So, as much as I was like, hey, who's got the money? First of all, who's going to pay for you to go, Sherrilyn? Shut up. But, the thought of paying that amount of money to probably like just pass out before we even submerged absolutely makes no sense for me. But I can see the appeal for people who are like equally as fascinated and, have the means to do it. That being said, I do think that there are a lot of lessons to be learned here. One of them being the trust that we put into basically experimental ventures like this, like companies having 100% transparency on test results need to be available to the public in order for them to actually make a fully informed decision of the risks that they want to take. Like I said, this was absolutely avoidable, and I believe that had the passengers seen the concerns that some of the earlier like partnering organizations like Boeing and the University of Washington had seen about the design and Titan itself, I don't think that they would have boarded. Truly. Now, there are 2 recent documentaries that have been released on the tragedy. One is on Netflix. One is on the Discovery app, I believe. The Netflix one is called Titan, the Ocean Gate Submersible Disaster, and the Discovery one is Implosion, the Titan Sub Disaster. I think both are great. I do think that you hear more from like former employees and former partners who were bringing concerns to the CEO, what am I trying to say? Stockton Rush on the Netflix one, and then them getting fired. Maybe it's the hair. No, we're not talking about the hair. Then the Discovery one, it goes a bit more into humanizing the tragedy. And I think that, I don't know, like that to me, is always the most important, because something that was very unsettling to see in real time, even during the early hours, like before we knew like that this was like a recovery mission, like when it was rescue, hoping that like they were still alive, the dehumanization of the tragedy through like memes everywhere. It was crazy. Really crazy to see. And I don't know if I was more sensitive to it just because of being like in the true crime space and being able to recognize that there are actually like family members and friends associated with the people that are behind this like story. It's not a story, it's real life. And that's mentioned by family members of the victims who participated in both of the documentaries. It was Paul Henri's daughter who participated in the Netflix one, and I thought that she was just incredible and was able to kind of like articulate what that was like for her. And then the wife of the mother and son that were on participated in the Discovery one, and yeah, I thought they both did like phenomenal jobs. So honestly, like both, if you're like wanting to pick, I wouldn't pick. I would watch both of them because both of them, you hear from different family members, different perspectives. But one thing that was like common was that the dehumanization was just like crazy to see in real time. Obviously, I get it. Like people are going to have theories and opinions naturally. I do think that there's like a respectful way to go about that. One of those opinions reoccurring was like, you don't mess with resting places. Pretty much it was like, what do you expect? Like you're going down to see the Titanic knowing like all of the tragedy behind it, and it was like messing with things, you know, like you're just kind of like messing with fate here. But the latest discussion that I have been seeing since the release is that the CEO, Stockton Rush, knew this was going to happen and intended to take his life. And that I have thoughts on. So we are going to get into that as well. But let's start with like who is Stockton Rush? So his name is actually Richard Stockton Rush III. He was born on March 31st, 1962 in San Francisco, and he was born into money. His family had deep wealth. His grandfather had led the shipping company American President Lines, and his maternal grandmother is the namesake of San Francisco's Davies Symphony Hall. He graduated from Princeton University in 1984 with a BS in aerospace engineering, followed by an MBA from UC Berkeley in 1989. And from an early age, Rushton dreamed of exploration. Initially, he was wanting to be an astronaut, and then that focus eventually shifted over to the ocean as he got older. He became a certified scuba diver at 12 and then a commercial pilot even in 18. And it's definitely described that he has always been like an adventurer and thrill seeker. Like I said, as an adult, his interests pivoted to undersea exploration, and he built a fortune by investing his inheritance into technology businesses and wanting to purchase a submarine of his own. I guess he discovered pretty early on that he was not able to just like purchase a submarine, as there were like less than 100 privately owned submarines worldwide. So he decided to build one from public blueprints that were available in 2006, and he named it Suds. For any Titanic the movie fans, it kind of looks like the one in Titanic. I think it's called Snoop. When I say that, I'm like, was it dog? No, it was Snoop. And that's the one that they like released at the beginning to like explore into the rooms. Once he did that, the goal, it seems like for him, which is it's fine. It's a great goal, like thing, and I guess quality to have is that once you attain goals, like there's more, right? Like if you're always striving to do more and it's positive, that's not a bad quality to have. So it was like once he like achieved that, then the dream got bigger. So it wasn't only to have a sub for his own exploration. He wanted to bring underwater exploring to the public. He believed that, like undersea exploration was a very underserved market, if you will. And he thought, like, he wanted to change the narrative that submersibles had this reputation of being dangerous, and he wanted to change that perspective and even criticize the Passenger Vessel Safety Act of 1993, saying like they've needlessly prioritized passenger safety over commercial innovation. Like they're holding us back. There's a whole world for us to explore under the sea. I want to do that. So in 2009, Stockton Rush and Guillermo Sherrilyn founded OceanGate, both with the shared vision of kind of something similar as like space tourism brands that we're seeing right now, like Blue Origin, but for the ocean. Now, according to Guillermo, he and Stockton had planned to purchase a fleet of submersibles that were capable of diving at least 4,000 meters. And this is wild because like the pressure at that depth is unimaginable. You know what else is unimaginable? Me trying to say unimaginable. Unimaginable. Their whole goal was to use it for a variety of purpose, not just like tourism, but like also military operations and scientific research. Again, I get it. I get it. It sounds good on paper, right? Their first vessel was called the Antipodes, which was purchased. This was already something that was out there. They purchased it from Hoffman Yacht Sales for $295,000 American. And between 2010 and 2013, the company did an estimated 130 dives with this vessel. They were also able to rent this out to researchers and did take tourists who the company referred to as citizen scientists. We'll get into a little bit of this later on underwater excursions. And Guillermo was saying like in those early days, passengers were typically paying around $7,500 to $40,000 per person to do this, depending on the excursion. The problem with this was that vessel only had a maximum depth rating of 1,000 feet or around like 300 meters. Stockton always wanted more ambitious depths. And in 2013, the company began designing its own submersible with unique designs, they said, that were more cost effective to like bring this, like to the masses. Now, Guillermo had quit the company that same year. He said that OceanGate had transitioned from its, initial phase to Stockton's, goals and like more focused on his specialty of engineering. And even though he wasn't like directly involved in like the day-to-day things, I think he like retained a minority stake in it, but was not like actively involved in like the day-to-day operations. I personally think that the Titanic was always the goal for Stockton and that was definitely a business move. He has said in multiple interviews that as a business venture, like so straight up saying like profit-wise, I guess, the most appealing thing to do would be to take people to the Titanic because it is the most well-known underwater site. There was even a tie there with Stockton. His wife, Wendy Rush, is actually the great-great-granddaughter of Isidore and Ida Strauss, who were first-class passengers on the Titanic, and they died when it sank. They went down with the ship. They were actually the inspiration behind that like older couple in the movie who refused to leave each other and then like were laying on the bed at the end. Very sad. But yeah, they all very wealthy. Isidore Strauss was the co-owner of Macy's department store. So Wendy is a direct descendant of Minnie Wheel, I believe, one of Strauss's 7 children. Now, I didn't know that the Titan was not the first custom-built submersible OceanGate built. The first one was called Cyclops, later called Cyclops 1, and it was built in collaboration with the University of Washington and Boeing. The whole thing about this was that the hull of it was planned to be a carbon fiber hull. But there were a lot of problems with this. And since there was this collaboration with like companies like Boeing, just not on board with it, they ended up it was kind of like a Frankenstein thing, I guess. They extracted this like cylindrical steel hull from another vessel called the Lula, and then they used it to create Cyclops 1. In December 2016, though, Stockton could not get over this like carbon fiber hull. So OceanGate ordered the first titanium components for Cyclops 2. So they were like, okay, we're going to go off and do our own thing and kind of, take what we learned from this project, but like make it the way that I wanted to initially. Cyclops 2 was later renamed Titan, so it was Titan. And this design was to fulfill this cylinder hull out of carbon fiber. So carbon fiber is a lightweight but high strength composite material of like tightly packed carbon threads cemented with resin, used in everything from like sports cars to skis. Like the uses are endless, and I get the appeal, right? It's a third of the weight of traditional titanium steel, which would, be used for something like this. There's a couple issues with that, though, that were made very clear from the get-go. One of them being carbon fiber has never been tested in extreme depths like that and has no reliable safety record. 2, its integrity naturally degrades with repeated use. Like I said, the pressure to get to Titanic is astronomical. And I always remember the legend Bill Paxton in Titanic when he says, that's 2.5 miles down, 3,821 meters. The pressure outside is 3.5 tons per square inch. These windows are 9 inches thick. And if they go, that's sayonara in 2 microseconds. His delivery was much better than mine, but you know what I mean? I always thought about that. Even then when I was doing that little Pepsi challenge, I was like, I don't know if I could do that. Like, I need to know how thick these windows are. And that's like really what I learned about. Like, I learned more about Titanic or like science and stuff like that from that movie, but that there was like pressure, in things like the sky and the ocean. So if you are using something in a design that's already controversial and dangerous, and you're wanting to use a material that also has issues, like that's where I get the idea of the appeal of it, but it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, it's literally meant to just degrade with repeated uses, especially like when it hasn't been tested at like depths this insane. Like there's a reason why like normal vessels who, like could handle this, like Titan isn't the only one that go down there. Like Robert Ballard, James Cameron's bestie, he's gone a lot, but it's like the money to invest in like something like that is also astronomical. But I just like this, I'm not an engineer, and I'm like, buddy, this is, we've got like people with like, dreams. This is beyond. This is like insanity. Now, the shape was also experimental, okay? So spherical, I guess, if you will, or like something like that is preferred. And Stockton wanted this like cylindrical, like a cylinder shape. How about that, Sherrilyn? Because that would be like the easiest to like transport more people like more comfortably, because you could kind of like all like sit in it. With his design, you got in through the porthole in the front. And once you were in, you were bolted from the team on the outside with 18 bolts. I will say there's a little, so there was 18 bolts, but I will say that 2 times in the documentary of the Discovery Channel, it was mentioned that only 4 were generally used, because Stockton was like, oh, like the pressure once you get there will just like push it in anyways. Almost like a time saver. Like the amount of corners that were cut for what is just, I can't comprehend. I've tried to be understand. I can't. So irresponsible. Needless to say, on March 18th, the Cyclops 2 was renamed to Titan, and there was the intention that the maximum depth was going to be 400 meters or 13,000 feet, okay? So emphasis on experimental nature, because this was not a certified design. It was not even registered, like meaning it was off the radar of like Coast Guards to be able to like keep an eye on it. And carbon fiber has not been approved for man-made submersibles. Now, this part is a little bit, not complicated, but it's something I didn't understand. So, like, you got, like, your submersible. Okay, you've got the Titan, and that first Titan had gone through about like 15 months of testing, and it had been on 46 dives. Of those 46 dives, only 3 had reached the depths of the Titanic and that amount of pressure. On dive 47, that was the first time to carry passengers to the depth of the Titanic. Now, on the deepest dive prior to visiting Titanic for the first time, Titan was in Bahamas, and Stockton Rush had brought a young expert who he was an expert on like photographing like 3D, like doing like 3D model scannings. I don't know what I'm trying to say. And his whole purpose of being on the Titan was to, you know, like Stockton wanted to like strap up a scanner outside of the Titanic and test it out there to, you know, like be able to like get everything, you know, locked and loaded for when they go to the Titanic to be able to like eventually use this 3D scanner to do a 3D scan of the Titanic. He's interviewed in the Discovery documentary, and he says that without like saying this is extremely experimental, the waiver mentioned death a lot of times, but Stockton was like, you know, like, do you have a wife and kids prior to going on the dive? And he was like, no. And then he was like, okay, well, like, you're in. So it's like those things to like kind of keep in mind, because, well, again, I keep saying we're going to get into that in a minute. We will get into it in a minute, but his phrasing and like omissions of the dangers, but still like implying dangers is concerning, was unethical. That's probably the best way to say it. The other passenger on that dive was a colleague and dive expert. His name was Carl Stanley. And Carl said on this dive, they could hear the carbon fiber cracking. He said the first crack was like a gunshot, and they all just kind of like looked at each other. And he said that, you know, no one wanted to be the one to like freak out and have a full-blown panic attack and be like, bring me up, bring me up. So they just kind of like continued falling. And it's described that when you're in this thing, like you're free falling. You're going down. So they just keep going. And Carl says it keeps cracking and it keeps cracking. And he says around the 10th crack, he was able to like look and kind of detect where the noise was coming from. And he's like kind of looking around, and Stockton's just like, yeah, it's all good. That's normal. It's happened before. We've heard those noises before. It's to be expected with like, you know, the changes in pressure. So they keep going. They get to the bottom. He says the exterior lights, they go out. Stockton's wanting to forge on. And he's like, I want to get, you know, to the depth. Like, we got to keep going. But the cracking is still going. So at that point, they collectively are like, you know what? I think we should go back up. So the next day, Carl says he sends an email to Stockton saying, those sounds we heard yesterday were not good. That absolutely sounded like a defect. And there is one area that I was kind of like able to hear that seems to be breaking down from this extreme pressure. And I truly believed that had we kept going, like we were minutes away from imploding. He said that after sending this, he was pretty much phased out by Stockton. And that's a reoccurring thing that you hear in both documentaries. For Netflix, you hear more of it from like actual staff and like investors and partners that were like, you know, or like experts that were brought on. Anybody who had a concern, like you were gone or you were phased out. So when he's sending this as a friend having concerns, he's just kind of like, yeah, like brushed aside and like, it's all good. And then it's like, he just didn't want to be my friend anymore. So what he didn't know was he was right. There was a crack that was identified the following month of that dive, but he didn't know that until after the tragedy because he'd already been pushed out. What Carl also didn't know at the time was a photo of that crack was sent to the director of engineering at OceanGate. His name is Tony Neeson. And he gets this photo and he's asked, like, is this normal? And he says, absolutely not. The hull needs to be completely rebuilt, meaning that the hull with that crack is not just getting repaired, it's getting scrapped and a new one is getting built. And he says, not only that, but like this carbon fiber theory is not showing reliability at all. That's not okay in any capacity. He's fired after that. Stockton goes on to rebuild another carbon fiber hull. And before it's even completed, okay, so completed, let alone it has not been tested, he starts selling tickets and advertising to go down to see the Titanic to the public. He is doing interviews saying Titan has done extensive testing. They are ensuring like safety. They refined this process over 11 years in the making. When you hear something like that, you're like, of course you understand that there's going to be like little test subjects, like smaller models of replicas of like what you're doing, and test over test over test over test. But your idea would be like, there is like 11 years of the making, refined that this is absolute perfection. Not, we keep seeing red flags throughout these 11 years and tweaking things here and there, but going back to the same methods that kept failing us. Like this man knew, every qualified person and expert around him kept saying, scrap the carbon fiber dream, bro. We gotta halt. He even went on to speak at a conference, the Explorers Club, in 2017, and termed submersibles the safest vehicles on the planet.
But they're statistically the safest vehicles on the planet.
And that is my biggest issue with Stockton Rush, how he words things. Like he will say things to his teams, and even in several interviews, like that this is experimental, and it almost is like he'll just kind of like dust that in to kind of absolve him of the risks of what may go wrong. But then he follows up with like things like, these are the safest vehicles on the planet. We've done years and years of testing like to perfect it. The honest truth though, it was never perfected. And like even the Boeing team knew this was not even close. Like they literally had to bow out because they had put numerous design recommendations. Like they're trying to work with the guy. They're like let's do this. Their testing requirements were also rigorous, and it was almost like he would just like listen and just ignore it and be like, oh yeah, okay, and then just continue going on despite like all of the numerous testing that he is saying that he's perfected, which he hasn't. All of those testings are showing this thing cannot withstand this pressure. And it gets even deeper, you guys. This is like, I learned so much in both of these documentaries. Both, like I said, I can't say it enough. They both bring like so much value of things like I had no freaking idea about. So once he forges on, okay, so we've got like I'm trying to not call it the first Titan, but we had the Titan and it had the crack, right? They still keep like the body of it, and then they're redoing the hull. So they're salvaging parts of it, and they're also reusing parts from the failed submersible, and then Frankensteining it back together with a new carbon fiber hull. Not only that, he goes on to add lifting rings against the advice of engineers. Keep in mind, this man's also an engineer, okay? But other expert engineers who clearly had like morals, because they said, you can't do that, okay? Like the Titan cannot handle, on top of everything else, any tension or loads. So like those lifting rooms would be like, again, to basically like lift things up from the Titanic. So not only is his first idea of just like bringing people down there and chilling not working, he goes back to the drawing board trying to fix the first issue and adding new experiments onto it when people are like, no. And he just keeps going. And I mean, your guess is as good as mine. Why was he allowed to like continue and just like talk his way out of things? I've heard the term excellent salesman to describe him, and I would have to agree, I guess. Like he's good at talking, very good at talking. He was actually interviewed by a guy named Josh Gates for a show on the Discovery Channel called Expedition Unknown. I'm going to watch that now. I always see it like in my guide. And now like after seeing him in this, I'm like, I really like his style. I like it. So in this interview footage that he has, Josh is shown like a smaller scale model of the Titan. And this was like one of the earlier things that was used for the pressure testing. And he walks up to it and it's demolished. And so, you know, Stockton's like, this is good for testing, you know, like because we knew that it was gonna fail at like whatever points. But it's very interesting because in this documentary, he kind of, well, it's not really a documentary because it never went out, but there's this footage. So in this footage, Stockton is he's basically like saying how warped his thought process is and how inaccurate it is. He's describing like, okay, like this thing obviously like wasn't able to handle the pressure, but like from this we were able to listen to the carbon fiber, okay? He's like, we could listen to the hull and the cracks and the snaps in the carbon fiber, they tell us what it's doing. He goes, you know, if it's making more noise at 2,000 meters than it was the last time it went 2,000 meters, we know that we have to stop and go back to the surface because we have a problem. But if it's like all kind of just like sounding the same, like we're good. And I am no engineer, but with my limited knowledge of tension and pressure just in general, I don't know if it's because I have thick hair and my freaking hair elastics snap every 5 seconds. I know that's not how that works, buddy. Not at all. So Josh and his cameraman, they go on a not very like deep dive test to check this thing out also. And in a nutshell, he just says they were out there for several hours and the Titan did not do its job. It did not perform its job. It did not do what it is expected to do. There was mechanical issue after mechanical issue. The software and the communication system was failing. And at 1.3 of the thrusters weren't working. Like there's a lot that had gone on this like one like smaller scale dive. And he's like, Stockton's just like in his own world, like just like fidgeting with his little Logitech controller, being like, oh, I don't know why today this isn't working. He also didn't even have any plan in place in case of any emergency. Josh asks him, you know, like, have you guys done any like trial runs on how long it takes, you know, from the Titan getting onto its, you know, platform and the team unbolting and releasing the people from inside? He's like, no, never thought of doing that test. Even for a fire, he's like, you know, really the only thing that we have to worry about in here is like a fire. And in that case, like we are prepared. And he's got like these like fire hoods that are, I don't know, like stowed away. I don't even have a word for just how baffling, delusional, mind-boggling this all is, and infuriating, because at the end of the day, this isn't just like, this is real life. It's not just like retelling like an insane story of this insane guy. People lost their lives. There's one point where like things are just keep going wrong. They're still like in there, and Josh like jokes with Stockton as he's like looking down, trying to like fidget with things, and he's like, so this is the one that's going down to the Titanic, right? And Stockton's like, yep. Josh looks at this camera and he gives this like wink and this like face. It's nuts. Like they ended up having to go back up because of the issues. And Stockton's like not concerned. He's stoked about the footage captured. He's like, I hope even though we had to go up, like you were able to get enough, thinking that this thing is going to go live and like promote his company. He even brags about when you go deeper, too bad we couldn't go like deep enough, because like when you go deeper, the fiber is banging like crazy, and plays an audio of it for Josh. I can't. Like the ability to sell his confidence it should be studied. It really should, like, and to stroke his own ego. But once again, this is at the expense of other people's lives. What was really scary to learn is that on that dive with Josh, that new hull had only been on 3 dives. So they were like the 4th dive. And none of those dives had even gone to the depths of Titanic. So to have those issues with this new hull, not even being like close to those depths, is it's a terrifying thought. So Josh, he leaves. He leaves that place, literally calls the production company after and says, like, I'm sorry. I know that there was money invested in this project, but I cannot put something out there about this company where it may potentially, like, even if we say like our concerns, because this may potentially draw interest and people to this company, this submersible, like the idea, what kind of dream do you call it? Not a fever dream, pipe dream. And I know something bad's going to happen. He knew it, and it did. But Stockton was not deterred from them not helping promote. He made his own promotional material, advertised it to the public, saying that, like, this is the once in a lifetime opportunity. You can become a trained crew member and safely, those were the exact words in the advertise, safely dive to the Titanic. So this is what one thing that we're following back on, and it's referring to passengers in the waiver and to themselves as mission specialists. So this was like a loophole for Ocean Gate. It made it sound like you were aware of this risk that you were taking because, like with any experimental explorer, they would know that, like, I'm a mission specialist. I'm doing this for the cause. I know it comes with risks, but for passengers, they're not fully grasping the risk and sneakiness of giving them this like special title. It's like calling Katy Perry an astronaut, okay? That's what it is. Sure, people would understand a risk like this. Heck, we take risks by flying as well or getting into our vehicle every day. I get that. But the amount of issues here were just not laid out. They were not transparent at all. There was another dive prior to the Titan's last dive that also went horribly wrong. As it was being lowered into the ocean, prior to like just hitting the ocean, the dome flies open. And again, like we talked about before, only 4 of the 18 bolts were used to close the door. Like, what? Why? I can't. I literally can't. Despite this, they try again. Once again, in that dive log, it's riddled with issues. Nothing's working. The popping sounds are insane. The equipment's having issues. The thruster's not working. So they go back up. They tweak some more things and keep forging on. Again, I get it. Experimental, right? Titan did end up reaching Titanic depth 6 times in 2021, which I think is unbelievable. Like, it's crazy to have even done that. I believe Dive 80 was the last one to reach depth of Titanic before the Titan's last dive, and that was in June 2022. And during this dive, like, they go down, they see the Titanic, but the passengers say as they're rising to the surface and they see like the brightness of like, like almost being there, they're like, okay, like there's the sky. They hear this huge bang. Everybody jumps, very concerned, but also they're like, okay, well, we're at the top, like, so we're going to be good. But it was so loud that the crew at the surface waiting for them heard it come from the water. Allegedly, it's acknowledged and brought up in this team meeting, and Stockton kind of briefly is like, yeah, but was relatively unfazed. He just says that, this is what happens when you've got different materials joining together, coupled with the temperatures and the pressure changes. Like, it's normal. And again, there is an element of truth to that, but in this, there's also a huge lack of transparency about all of, like, just like collectively something this dangerous, like having those issues, like, it's not normal. It's not normal. What was discovered after the Coast Guard investigation after the implosion was that noise is something called a delamination of the carbon fiber. And it was recorded on the sound reports. So the Titan's equipped like with, sending messages to like their team like up at shore and stuff like that. One of those things is audio. And there's this like massive spike when that sound had happened. And that was like the delamination of this carbon fiber. At this point, what that noise signified was the outcome was inevitable. If nothing was changing and that hull was not going to be replaced, that was the beginning of the end, and it was just a matter of time. Once again, there was, you have to keep in mind that this is a business, right? There's employees and staff and crew members, and one of those crew members was somebody who was also interviewed in the documentary and said, like, that noise was not normal and knew that the Titan was supposed to go on a dive a few days later and said to their like superior, like, I have concerns. And she was told, yeah, people are concerned about you too because you don't have an explorer mindset. They were like, we're too innovative for you. So she left. And the Titan continued to go down after dive 80. Then it ended up being, like the season was on hold. It was left in a parking lot. The Titan, was left in the parking lot next to the harbor for most of the winter. So you've got freezing temperatures. You've also got fluctuating temperatures, which that in itself is like, it's basically like sitting there breaking apart from itself because, again, like that's like external pressures of like temperatures and like fluctuations and stuff like that. And it's so infuriating when you have that information that was not laid out to these passengers because, once again, like this is a death trap. Who in their right mind would know all of this and make that decision to board? Dive 88 on June 18th, 2023 was the final dive. That day actually was described as the perfect day to dive. The sun was out, the skies were blue, there was no wind, and the water was calm. On board, we know there was Stockton Rush, the CEO, Hamish Harding, who is a British billionaire explorer. He's also a friend of Stockton's and a lot of the crew at Ocean Gate. There was also Paul-Henri Naugelet, who is a French Titanic expert. He's also dubbed the godfather of diving and another one of Stockton's friends and crew. He had done multiple dives down to the Titanic. And then there was Shahzada and Suleiman Dawood, who were father and son, who were literally just thinking that they were along for the experience of a lifetime. They were not, explorers or, mission specialists going down there to help, do any recording and stuff like that. They essentially thought that this was just, an experience, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Suleiman actually took the place of his mom, Christine, who, again, like I said, she had participated in the Discovery documentary, and I teared up almost like every time that she was on screen because she brought her husband and her son to life and humanized them. And there were rumors that he didn't want to go. Like when all of this was coming out, there were rumors that he didn't even want to go. And he did it for his dad. And she said that that's not true. She said initially this trip was actually planned prior to the pandemic, which also gives you something to think about, right? Because like I said, he was advertising when they were in the process of reconstructing that second hull. And he was advertising in 2019. Wasn't even done. Hadn't even done its testing yet. So she was going to go on that expedition. And the only reason why things were like delayed, it wasn't to just keep doing testing. It was because of COVID. Like they had canceled things because you couldn't go. So when it finally opened up and they got this opportunity to go, her son asked, like he was wanting to take her place. And so she said, yeah. And she and her daughter obviously went with them, like flew with them to St. John's and stayed like on the platform while their, husband, father, and son and brother went down. Something I didn't know that just like, again, breaks your heart, humanizing like these victims, is that Solomon, he actually had brought his Rubik's Cube. He didn't go anywhere without it, and his intention was to set a Guinness World Record of completing this, the Rubik's Cube beside the Titanic. Like once they got down with it, so his dad like had brought a camera to film that moment, and he was supposed to be like incredible at Rubik's Cube. He could complete it in like 12 seconds, and that was something he was so excited for. And when you think about that, absolutely devastating and infuriating and sickening and all of the feels. Like I cannot even imagine. I also can't imagine the fact that like Christine and her daughter are literally there, and they heard like the team corresponding being like, we've lost communication with them. And she's like at first said like, I didn't really know what that meant. I'm just kind of like waiting for it to like come back. And even as like news reports were going, with the amount of oxygen that was left, it was like, that was like the goal, right? Like, so she was like, until then, like we've got 96 hours, and just did not want to like lose hope. Something that she said in the documentary gave me absolute chills though. She's so eloquent, like the way that she's able to explain herself. It's like very matter of fact, but brilliant with her words. And she says like, I lost my family to ego and arrogance above safety, and that irony is not lost on me, that is the same reason the Titanic sunk. Like literal chills. Obviously it's impossible to know like what those communications were like and feelings were like in the sub. It's obviously pretty obvious that they were hearing like the cracking and popping sounds and bangs, and probably being reassured by Stockton that like this is what happens. So at 9:15 a.m. is when they disengaged from the platform and started descending. And like I said again, like you are free falling into absolute darkness. As you're going down, the vessel is, communicating with the control at shore. And I guess it pings every like 5 to 10 seconds. So for 90 minutes, the control is able to see that they are traveling down. There's no indication of an emergency. And then at 10:47, a message comes through that says dropped 2 weights, and pings for the final time. And that is at 3,346 meters. What's very eerie, and I don't know if you've seen this, like I've seen this kind of like circulating online, is that during the investigation into the implosion, the Coast Guard team discovered video of that moment that communication was lost with like Ocean Gate Control Center. The one spearheading that was actually Wendy Rush, so like Stockton's wife. And they're listening, they're like reading all the things, and all of a sudden they heard this like on camera. And for them it's like a little bit of like a light like pop, I would say, like or like I don't know. It's described almost like a door closing. It's nothing crazy, obviously, because it's like sonar traveling, like you're like 3,000 meters down. But they know, like out of all the sounds that they've heard, this was concerning. Like on camera, you see her face change. She looks to the other crew member and she goes, "What was that bang?"
Yeah. It should be about 500 meters, 30. What was that bang? Dropped 2 weights. Titan dropped 2 weights.
Visibly frozen. But what I think led people to hold out hope for as long as they did is that a communication from Titan came in right after that said drop 2 weights, that final one. And so they kind of moved past it thinking everything's okay. It's like, okay, like we hear this bang, but then there was a communication. What we know now is it wasn't okay. That bang was the sub imploding And that message just came through on a delay. So the Coast Guard wasn't called until 5:40 p.m. to report them missing. Because again, they're like, well, we got this message and everything, like, you know, maybe it's just like we've had these technical difficulties, so it's going to be okay. Another very eerie coincidence is that, ironically, the U.S. Coast Guard was actually in St. John's because it was conducting a ice patrol mission, which is something that is done because of what happened with the sinking of the Titanic. Sadly, 4 days later, the Titanic was recovered from the bottom of the ocean. And it was an incredibly eerie sight to see this recovery taking place because you see pieces of the Titan like come into view from absolute darkness, and it was 500 meters from the Titanic. What the passengers would have experienced was like it was confirmed to be a catastrophic implosion. It is described as instantaneous and painless. It's a fraction of a second, I guess, where you are exposed to temperatures hotter than the sun and pressures more than double what's inside a scuba tank. That being said, like, that sounds scary, but experts on the documentaries were like, I guess it's like virtually the ideal way to pass, but it does not take away from the fact that it shouldn't have happened. It's like, great. But I'm sure had like the passengers known like this was going to happen and be like, you know, it's the ideal way to go, they would not have, especially the father and son who are like, they just think that they're going for an experience of a lifetime, not as crew passengers or experts or explorers. The only thing that was able to be retrieved from the wreck in terms of remains was a piece of Stockton Rush's shirt, and like caught up in it was a pen that was still intact, which is insane. Business cards and like stickers, like advertising like to go down and see the Titanic. Everything else, like the carbon fiber, cords, wires, it basically was just like sludge that had all been like pushed into like the dome of the hull, and that's like how it was able to be like retrieved. I wanted to kind of just like briefly touch on some of the conspiracy theories, like I said at the beginning, about like what people were thinking, like why he would do this. And a lot of what I've seen lately after these documentaries have released is that Stockton wanted to end his life, and that's why he did it. My thoughts are no. I don't think that there would have been any way that you would know that that was the day that this was going to implode. Also, I think it was in the Netflix documentary, it was mentioned that a goal of his was like, I think he called it like the Big Dick Club or something like that, where that's what he would refer to of like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And he wanted to be a part of it. He'd always be like, once we get here, once we get to this level, like we're part of this. Correct me if I'm wrong if you've seen it, but I'm pretty sure that's like, you know, like the BD Club. He was so arrogant. Like that's I can't say he was so like I know him, but the way he's been described by people who actually know him, it's like he would have been too arrogant. Like he was wanting that moment, you know? That being said, I do think there was almost an element of him knowing it, like expecting it, not in like on that day. And I think that that's where the difference and like the conflict that goes on in my head is. Obviously he knew how risky it was to go down there, like with the waiver and all the protective language, like repeatedly mentioning death and like the passengers being referred to as mission specialists. So then you have to wonder like, okay, well, like with all of these risks, like in his face, like was that just arrogance? Like he just thought he was invincible? Like why would you keep going? And for people who knew him said it was almost like he knew that this thing was like too far gone. Like so many investors had poured exorbitant amounts of money into this. And if he had been the one to just be like, it's not going to work, you know, like even to himself, what does that future like even look like? Because this has always been the goal. This has always been the dream. So now what's next? So some people believe like he just most likely came to terms with the vision that was, you know, that his vision was never going to come to fruition and was just like rolling the dice, like letting whatever was going to happen, which meant that innocent lives meant nothing to his pride. I think that that's basically what it comes down to, is like the pride thing. Like, he came from money, right? The company was valued at approximately $24 million. The Titan cost $8 million to make. And he had used his inheritance to also like help fund, among other investors. So I do get that, like having like the financial pressures, but like he had put like that was like the goal. It didn't seem like about money, right? Like, because initially he had it. It was the seat at this table with people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And to that, I would say, like, why? What did they, what do you want to talk about with it? I don't know. I just guess I've never been like somebody who's like fascinated with like being like, I need to get there. I want to go. I find I literally would be like so awkward at a table. Like, can you guys imagine me trying to articulate myself at a table like that? Ah, shit. Good thing it's not one of my dreams, I guess, right? I guess at the end of the day, we can like theorize all we want. It happened. And I strongly believe that like Stockton Rush knew this was inescapable and made the decision not to stop it. And so for that, you can't call it an accident, right? I think I saw that written somewhere where it was like, don't call it an accident, because an accident means like you weren't expecting it. Like, that was, could it have been preventable? Possibly, but not. And this is like, it's frustrating to like think about it because of the amount of people who had concerns. But in the same sense, it's like, where do you go? Like, where are you just gonna like set up shop outside of, you know, the dive site and like hold up signs and be like, don't get on this thing, like come and like read all of my documentations, right? Like there's ways of like just not having that information out there. But people did say things. Even James Cameron said something. I know that he's been interviewed a lot now, but he's like said like he Stockton Rush was like pushing and pushing for James Cameron to get involved. And he was like, no, I'm best friends with Robert Ballard. Like, we've already been there several times. I get your idea and your vision. I can appreciate the tenacity, but no freaking way. No way am I going on this. No way am I tying my name to this to entice anybody else to get on this. It's just, the whole thing is wild to me. And what's even more unsettling is Stockton Rush's former business partner. He seems to like, I mean, I don't want to like go and speculate, but he seems to be in some state of similar delusion, despite him never being on any of those dives to the Titanic and leaving the company in 2013. He still defends Stockton Rush. He's like, you know, when I was there, Ocean Gate operated as safely as possible. We had a very safety conscious culture, and like kind of just like refutes like any of these claims that Stockton didn't care about safety. It's blaring right in front of you. Like, how can you not? But he even testified like pretty much in support of Stockton Rush during the U.S. Coast Guard investigation, and said that, you know, you've got it all wrong. Stockton always prioritized others' lives because he knew like this was my idea. This is all on me. Even if he believed it, he recognized that like this was his dream. He said that like the first time that it like the Titan ever went down, Stockton was the only one in there and said like, even though I have faith in it, I don't want anybody else to be there if something goes wrong. And I mean, that's great and all, but that was the first dive, okay? Like, how many scorching red alarms were firing from all directions after that, and you brought people in it? So yeah, I don't know. But since this fully preventable tragedy, this guy Guillermo, he's continued to advocate for underwater exploration. And again, that's okay to advocate, like, again, time and place, responsibility, great. But in 2024, June last year, he announced his plans for his own company, Blue Marble Exploration. And he wants to launch submersibles. Come on, Sherrilyn. We're almost there. Submersibles to Dean's Blue Hole, which is an underwater sinkhole located in the Bahamas. Scientists have measured its depth at 663 feet, but no human has ever reached the bottom. So this guy, after seeing what happened to his friend and his old company, is like, let's like, this is what I don't understand. I do not understand. Wouldn't it be like, I believed in Stockton. I saw his mission, and like, let's just get to the Titanic then. If that's do you know what I mean? Like, if that was the goal, not encouraging anybody to like go on board and like follow this guy's dreams and delusions. But you're like, no, I'm going to start my own and like, fuck the Titanic. We're going where no man has ever reached before and bring you with me, baby. I don't know. Maybe he'll explain it. Apparently he is going to, he wrote a book. So maybe we'll hear more of his thoughts. I think he talks more about like the tragedy and like what that was like for him. I don't know. I really don't know. It's going to be released in November 2025. I'm going to be busy for all of November because Wicked for Good releases in, and I intend on going like every single day. So I may miss this book, but if you want to check it out, it's called Titan Unfinished, an untold story of exploration, innovation, and the Ocean Gate tragedy. So yeah. Again, I'll be busy. For now, when it comes to Ocean Gate, their operations have been suspended, and the investigation, I believe it's complete with the Coast Guards. It's completed, but their like ruling has not been announced. I believe the report is expected to be released later this year. And right now, at this point, there's no criminal charges that have been filed in connection with the implosion. So I do not think that this is the end of kind of like the implications of what happened. I don't believe Ocean Gate has really made like an official statement. They've said that they're fully cooperating with the investigation, but are waiting to make a statement. Don't want to say anything before the conclusion of the investigation, and I get it. And I, like I said, I absolutely appreciate exploration and the importance of it. But the boundaries, like this, to try to find loopholes like in terminology and waivers and omitting severe concerns to the public and passengers just for a profit, and not just a profit, but in my opinion, like pride and ego, like that's diabolical. I don't want to say the word because but it's like, it's a crime, basically, like schmurder, in my opinion. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts though, you guys. Have you ever been curious about doing this type of adventure? Were you also trying to name Titanic under the Pepsi lids like me? I'm very curious. This has been something I want to talk about for so long. So I'm glad that now we have a chance to discuss. I want to hear your thoughts. Please be respectful. I love you so much. That is it for me today. Thank you again to Fume for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to go over to tryfume.com/SherrilynDale or use my code SherrilynDale to get a free Fume topper when you purchase a journey pack today. And the answer to today's riddle is, quick refresher, I wander without settling, map in my hand, through jungle or desert, across sea and sand. I seek what's unknown, I knock every door, history's made by the steps I implore. What am I? And the answer is an explorer. Okay. I love you guys so much. I'll see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.